Okay, so let's talk about that really strange, super awkward feeling so many of us get when someone tries to give us a compliment. Instead of feeling good, you kind of just want to disappear. Why on earth does that happen?
You know the exact moment I'm talking about, right? Someone praises your work, or they tell you they really appreciate you. And instead of that warm, fuzzy feeling, you just get this squirm. You might try to downplay it or deflect or just change the subject as fast as you can. It's such a common reaction, but it's not about being rude or ungrateful. Turns out it's a really deep psychological reflex.
So, on the surface, yeah, it totally looks like you're just being humble. But what's really going on under the hood is that your mind is firing up this powerful, really old defense mechanism. It's actually trying to protect your identity from what it sees as a threat. I know, it sounds dramatic, but it all comes down to how our brains build our sense of who we are.
See, your brain is navigating the world using a kind of map, an internal story it's constantly telling itself about who you are. And this map, it's been built over years and years of experiences. So when a compliment comes along that doesn't fit on that map, your brain basically sounds the alarm.
And that alarm has a name: cognitive dissonance. Now, if you're trying to explain this to your book club or maybe even reviewing for a quiz, this is the key term you gotta know. It's that mental static, that discomfort you feel when new information, like a nice compliment, completely clashes with a belief you've held for a long time, like, I'm not actually that good at this. That uncomfortable feeling is literally your brain struggling to hold two opposite ideas at once.
And here's the wild part. Your brain isn't just kind of shrugging off the praise, it is actively rejecting it. For someone who has a really ingrained negative self-image, it's actually more comfortable for the brain to stay in that familiar safe zone of low self-worth than it is to accept a version of you that it just doesn't recognize.
So, beyond that big core reason, there are a few other ways this whole thing shows up. First up, for a lot of us, praise doesn't feel like a gift at all. It feels like a ton of bricks.
Yeah, instead of it being a reward for something you did in the past, a compliment can feel like an invoice for your future performance. It suddenly becomes this debt that you now have to pay back by always living up to that new, higher standard.
And here's what that internal translation sounds like. They say something simple like, "Great job," but your brain hears, "Okay, the bar has just been raised and you can never, ever let it drop." Especially if you were the reliable one growing up, praise isn't a celebration, it's just the starting block for the fear of failing later.
So on top of that feeling of pressure, there's also just the sheer discomfort of being seen, and sometimes this nagging suspicion about the person who's even giving you the compliment.
When someone praises you, it's like they've turned on a giant spotlight and aimed it right at you. And for an overthinker, this is pure agony. Your mind just goes into overdrive. Am I smiling the right way? Did my thank you sound genuine enough? This intense self-consciousness turns what should be an uplifting moment into a totally draining performance.
Our brains are basically just pattern recognition machines, you know? So if you grew up where praise was usually just a setup for criticism, like, this is really great, but you should have done this part better, your brain learns that pattern. It gets hardwired to always wait for the other shoe to drop.
And that suspicion, it leads right to this question. Your brain is just trying to protect you from being let down or even manipulated. It's not really rejecting the kind words themselves, it's questioning the motive behind them. It's a defense mechanism born out of a learned lack of trust.
And that deep-seated distrust often links up with our final big reason, which is all about how we've been taught to calculate our own value. For many of us, that worth feels completely conditional.
Think about it. If you've learned that your value comes from what you do for other people, from being useful, from fixing things, then a compliment that isn't attached to a specific action feels really weird and unsettling. It's like getting paid for a job you don't even remember doing. It feels unearned and kinda suspicious.
This is such a perfect way to picture it. Imagine your brain has a mailroom with a specific slot for reward for effort. When a piece of mail comes in labeled unconditional praise, there's just no slot for it. Your brain doesn't know where to file it, so it gets flagged as spam because it just doesn't fit the system you've been using your whole life.
So, after hearing all that, you might be feeling a little called out. I get it, but this is the hopeful part. Just recognizing these patterns is the most powerful thing you can do, because that's what opens the door to actually changing them.
And this is probably the most crucial takeaway. These reactions are not character flaws. They are not permanent parts of who you are. They are simply survival strategies that you learned in your past. And the beautiful thing about something that's been learned is that it can also be unlearned. So how do you even start to rewire this stuff? Well, it begins with something really simple: awareness. The next time you feel that awkwardness bubble up, don't fight it, just notice it. Then get a little curious. What's the story my brain is telling me right now? Is it the pressure story, the distrust story? And finally, just acknowledge it. Ah, there's my brain trying to keep me safe again. Just understanding the pattern is the giant first step to changing it.
So I'll leave you with this final thought. Getting the why behind this feeling is a huge leap. The very next step is just a tiny act of practice. It's about consciously making a decision to let one tiny piece of positive information get through that old filter. So what's one kind word, maybe from someone else, or maybe even from yourself, that you'll just let yourself believe just for today?